Hello, everybody. I'm not here to collect your homework. We're here just to chat. It's nighttime here in the Bronx on this Tuesday, rainy December. And welcome, audience. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. I have a BitChute channel for when my YouTube channel gets erased, which I think it inevitably will as soon as they find out what I talk about. But I feel compelled to share with you some stuff that happened today because I have ways to get people to despair. I used to be kind of a collapsitarian. I'm very well versed in being able to tell you how things have gone wrong. I read a lot and I enjoy history. So what happens is I'm able to see patterns, as many well-read people are able to do, and explain these things to impressionable young people. It can become kind of a scary, fearful place. And I don't mean to be like that. And there's actually a lot more good out there and a lot more reason to relax and be positive than one might expect. So I just have to tell you, I have two senior classes, and I'm thinking right now of two particular 12th graders that always make the day better in the sense of restoring faith in humanity, watching an active young mind at work. And I had a young woman in the 7th period class today, 12th grade, presentational speaking class. It's a public speaking class where we're going over how to talk in front of a group with a purpose. And the current presentation that we're analyzing, that we're prepping for, is a persuasive presentation where you have to persuade the group of your premise, whatever it is. And so we were talking about the ways in which the top of the pyramid, they at the top, and who they are, again, is we've talked about it in the past and we'll go back to it, but who they are, how they use psychological techniques that they understand to move the herd, to move the crowd the way they want. And I walked them through the Edward Bernays Torches of Freedom bit from the early 1900s, where Edward Bernays was able to not only make the head of a certain tobacco company wealthy, but he was able to undo the taboo for smoking for women. Now I want you to think about that. One guy understanding herd mentality and psychological things, psychological tenets, psychological ingredients of the human mind, and sociological things to manage the crowd, to manage the herd, changed the course of an industry, changed the course of a country, changed the course of human events, in the sense that breaking a taboo in the West, as a matter of fact, let me not even say the West, but let's say America, which by 1914, 1912 was a leader of the West. And so Edward Bernays was able to make it so that it was okay for women to smoke. So they too can have all the smelliness and lung cancer effects and, smelly fingers of smokers. Great. That's just wonderful. Yay, women can smoke too. And what he did was, he didn't make it a funny, ironic thing like I'm doing. He had his friends in the press. Even then, the corporate press was repellent and disgusting. It wasn't nearly as bad as it is now. But they were doing their things then. Front page article in the New York Times explaining how the suffragettes holding up torches of freedom. And what were the torches of freedom? Cigarettes. And how dare you question that? You must hate women. Because everybody knows that a strong, independent woman can do just the same kind of stuff as a man can, like vote and smoke cigarettes. How dare you say otherwise, you misogynist? And so, shame and crowd behavior and the movement of the group and the authority of the mainstream press. All of those things got put in the got put into the mix to see to it that now women could smoke. And instead of only half the population filling the tobacco industry's coffers, you now had the entire population buying cigarettes and, in effect, doubling the money-making power of the tobacco industry. And so, does that sound like a conspiracy to you? It should, and it happened, and that's how it went, which is why you're kind of a moron if you're the person that says, oh, there could never be a conspiracy because someone would talk. It would just be out there. No one would ever know. Well, you look this stuff up and you find out what you can, right? So we talked about that. We also mentioned in class, we mentioned a couple of things. One of them was the idea of guns in schools. We were talking about how we're going to have some kind of school gun policy thing coming up during one of our professional development days. And so we were talking about guns in schools and why they're there. And I mentioned that, and the students were coming up with a lot of reasons why one of the fixes wouldn't work. People talk about having teachers or staff or administration or security, those people holding guns and having those people have guns in schools. And they were coming up with good arguments against having armed adults. And so I said, it's a trade-off. If a student gets a hold of a teacher's gun, or a teacher loses his or her marbles and fires at students, then you have a school shooter situation. And you're back where you started, where you don't have anyone who can fire back. There's no armed citizen available to fight back against a shooter in a school. And so they thought about that. And someone, and as a quick side note, just to why I deleted my Facebook account and how brain dead people are, I had a person I went to high school with say that the armed citizen around and available to fight back against a shooter, that's a myth. That's actually, someone actually typed that. A guy I went to high school with said, that's a gun owning, or that's a Second Amendment gun owner weirdo argument. There's never, armed citizen argument is fake. It's a total myth. Anyway, just to show you that many of my students are smarter than some of the adults I went to high school with, one person was like, it would be nice that we would need a test case, though. We would need an instance where this has been the case. And I said, I'm surprised you haven't heard about Utah. And they're like, what are you talking about? I said, well, Utah as a state decreed that concealed carry permit holders are allowed to carry in schools. And they don't have to tell their administrators. They don't have to tell top brass that they're carrying. They can just do it. And they were like, what? I said, okay, you look it up. And we looked it up in class. And sure enough, of course, because I know this kind of stuff, since 2014, teachers can carry in Utah. And I showed them the Daily Kos, Newsweek, how they framed that when it happened, to say that, look at what they're doing, look at how crazy this is, it's going to be terrible. Which the Daily Kos, which used to be a site that people read, Newsweek, which used to be a major magazine. No one pays attention to these things anymore. No one under the age of 67. But they were saying, look at how terrible this is going to be. So I had the brilliant student ask, right, young man by the window, ask, well, we would need some kind of test subject. We would need to see this. And I showed them that your news media has kept it from you. They understood it immediately. And then I showed them the headlines from that era when Utah passed the rules, and they instantly saw the spin on the headlines from Daily Kos, Newsweek, and all the usual suspects in corporate progressive media, because they want disarmed, defenseless citizens. And I said, with the stuff that we've been taught, because I don't exempt myself, I've been wizarded, I've had spells put on me, just like everybody else. And I said, a lot of the stuff that we've been told is nonsense. And the young woman I had mentioned earlier in this video, she had mentioned earlier about the role of women. They're reading an interesting article in their sociology class on role of women, and she and the other young woman in period 2, these articles actually make them think. The smart ones always self-identify. And so I said, even the women's role bit, because we had talked about the gun stuff before, or we had just finished the gun stuff, and I said, I try to sum things up and say, look, we've been told all kinds of nonsense. And I brought up that, young woman and I had talked about the role of women because she was reading this article in sociology, and she'd mentioned to me, and I said, even the role of women and the way it was is mind-bogglingly bad. Because we're taught, and she brought it up because it talks about the role of women in the home, and this article had made her think, and we're taught that, taking care of and providing for and working for your children, a woman working for her children, working for her husband at home, we're told that that's bad. That's bad. That's a powerless woman. She's a housewife and she's shackled, and men want her barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen. This is an argument you've heard. Undoubtedly, you've heard this argument. So, that is somewhat nonsense, because that's bad, but a woman in a cubicle wasting 25 years working for a corporation so that it and the people who run the corporation can make more money, that is good. And I'm speaking the truth, because that's what we're told. That's what I was taught. I have high school friends. Many of them woke up and broke the spell. But they were working for a company. They were working for a large hotel chain, large banks, big education, universities, and they were foregoing having children. Now, many of them snapped out of it and had children and have wonderful families and are great people. But we were told, you got to be a strong woman and do your career. Really? So that Pfizer can make more money? So that JP Morgan Chase, so that its stock price can go higher? And that's good? The woman can have the corner office. Yeah, okay, you can. And that's great. But the twisted, wizard-like, sick part of it is we're told by our overlords that being a woman at home, a homemaker, a housewife, a mother, that's bad. So this talk really shook this young woman in the 7th period class up, and because I then added on, I gotta be me. And I added on that you're also, right, being snookered, because now, instead of one income being taxable and going into the government coffers, now there are two. Now the woman's income is coming in, tax, money go to government, doesn't go to you, and the man, the father, his income as well now goes. So they get two incomes instead of one. They have family, call it family breakup, right? They've got kind of fractured family to some degree. And then the stigma of the housewife, those oppressed women, that too is done. That's psychological. That's the psychological twist at the end that makes you believe what they want you to believe to get the outcome that they wanted in the first place. So that's why I say you got to watch what people do. Do the people pushing this kind of stuff, do they not have families? Are they not married? Do the women stay home and take care of the children? You got to check. Who's advocating for some of these policies? And so all of these things came out in class, and boom, great question came out from the person I was talking about. And she was saying, we have all of this knowledge because these are bright seniors. There isn't a dud in the bunch from what I can tell. I got a few, maybe dimmer bulbs, but no duds, none. And so she asked, she's like, well, we have all this knowledge, we learn all this stuff, because she's saying she's talking about us, including herself. What are we supposed to do with it? Brilliant question. Brilliant question. And it was the maybe I'm overstating this, but I don't think so. The intellectual electricity was palpable in the room, because it's the question. What do we do with both exoteric and esoteric knowledge when we recognize the patterns, we see that we are being manipulated, we now can pinpoint stupid and ignorant things that we don't need to follow, and we don't need to be afraid. We don't need to be scared. We don't need despair and cynicism. And I said, that's a great question, and I answered it in a way that only this age person, I'm 47, and if she'd asked me that, let's say, more than 5 years ago, I wouldn't have had as good an answer as I did today. And that's really the crux of this podcast. Today, I had the right answer at this age. If she'd have asked me 10 years ago, I would not have given her a good answer. If she'd have asked me 20 years ago, forget about it. My answer would have been atrocious. But I answered it today in a way that I think is right. And I told her, first of all, take all of your knowledge, all of the things you know, and use it to enable that you live the fullest, most robust, abundant life possible. You can't impart that on other people. You're not going to share that knowledge and get people to just change their mind and be better people and maybe live a little bit more way that you think is more morally correct or whatever. No. You take that knowledge and you live your fullest life. You have the most abundant life. You see to it that you take care of you and yours, and create happiness in your immediacy. Usually family, because that was my second point. And this is the kind of thing that gets people banned from YouTube. I told her she should get married and have as many children as she can. I don't mean have 12 kids like they did back in 1792 because they just did. Have a good, healthy, large-ish family. Whatever that is to you. A large family to me is 4 or 5 kids. Now, my grandmother was one of 8. My wife is one of 8. Right? My doorman, when I was a young person, he was one of 15. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about big family according to us. And nurture that family and have that family be, again, as cohesive and happy and abundant as possible. And both of those things don't cost that much. Having a family, of course, is a cost, but the rewards are infinite. And I told her, I said, my wife and I at this stage wish we'd had more children. No lie. Because it's that rewarding. And I would have never said that as an answer back in the old days. Not in a million. No, I would not. My mind was wizarded. My mind was gravy. So, the bad kind of gravy. Not the good gravy now, but the bad gravy, the dry gravy. So in closing, I mentioned a quick third thing to do, and it was to surround yourself with like-minded people. So if you have people constantly screaming about race, white people are bad, cis white heteronormative men are evil and colonialist, that's what she's going to see on the campus. Maybe those aren't people that you want to hang around with. Or if you see people that are saying, well, you know, we need more government control of the schools and of the economy, because if we can do that, the country will be a better place, and the government will take care of our education and our healthcare system, our housing, our food supply, and our medical care. Well, you can't be a thinking person and think that that's legitimate. You can't. You can't be a reasonably thoughtful person and look around and say, yeah, okay, that's the way we should do it. So, but all of that aside, the idea of these are young people. Again, my oldest student is 18. They see and hear what we talk about in our class, in sociology class, in their history classes, and they process and they decide, you know what, I'm going to find out what some of the truth might be. I'm going to dig a little bit. I'm going to analyze things philosophically. And then I'm going to try to find out what to do with myself in a productive way. I think more people need to do that. We have it happening in class. I think you guys should try to have that happen both just in your own head and with your friends as well. There is no homework. There's no mandatory reading. I'll talk to you next time.